welcome to the Rebel Ballerina Show, where we learn to live a kick-ass rebel life. I'm your host, Lisa Lurie, the Rebel Ballerina. There's no farting around in this show, just straight up fun. But if your ears are sensitive, go ahead and move along. If you want a truly kick-ass life, well, then here we go. Hello, welcome back to the Rebel Ballerina Show. I'm Lisa Lurie, the Rebel Ballerina. Hope you're having a great day. Thank you for coming and showing up and see what's going on in the rebel world. So today I'd like to talk about when is enough enough. We've been talking about a couple of things, specifically the folks that make up the category of narcissists. You could call them takers, manipulators, exploiters. If they're really, really, really bad, they may actually have full on NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. I am not here to diagnose that. I'm just saying that these are the categories of different types of personalities out there. These folks we've heard a lot about in the past 10 years or so, and it's been really good to have a deeper understanding and awareness of who they are, especially for those of us who have had a lot of dealings with that type of personality. And then, of course, there is, okay, so what about us, the people who aren't in that category, who are more givers, peacemakers, empaths? What about those of us who end up with the other? So we've talked a lot about that the last couple of days. There's been so much great information. And of course, I still reference Pete Walker and his fantastic book, Complex PTSD: From Surviving to Thriving. It's one of the major tools that I used to step away from that fawn response pattern as a trauma response pattern. In other words, I still get to be a giver and do things for others when it makes sense, and I'm giving to people who are of the same giving nature, right? So in other words, it's reciprocal. That's a safe person to give to. And also someone who is in that group would be much more inclined to understand if you say, you know what, I am so sorry, but I just can't do it this time, or something, whatever the request was. And they're much more understanding. Whereas when you say that to someone who is a taker and exploiter, they'll probably have a hissy fit, which makes it even more difficult for the people like us, like me, to be able to stand my ground and say, no, I can't. It's just not going to happen. So the information is out there. It's become very clear, which is great, because I needed to have my eyes open to this particular info, the distinctions between these different trauma response patterns. There's also freeze and flight, but they tend to have a little bit more nuance towards fawn already, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. And then, of course, we have the fight, and those of us who are full on fawns. My question today is, excuse me, how much is enough? When is enough really enough. For me, it took a ridiculous amount. I guess I like to take things to the extreme. And unfortunately, it was extreme. It was so extreme that it was going to cost me my very life. I felt like my soul had already disappeared, that I had been evaporated as a person. I definitely felt like I was a mere possession to someone instead of being celebrated as an actual individual and having what makes me me contributed to. Instead, it was all of me contributing to the other and not anything in return in the beingness. Oh, I had great things, and that's part of why this was so difficult for me to even understand and for others watching to understand as well, because from the outset, it looked like, I had a beautiful house. We traveled. I had whatever I needed, I could go get. So it just seemed like, well, what are you complaining about then? But that only added to the difficulty of what was really going on behind the scenes, energetically and in physic form. So I was never hit, never really even yelled at, but there was definitely this manipulation going on. If things weren't the way they were wanted, then there was pushback. There was definitely something was not good. I happen to be an expert fawn. I grew up in such a way that twofold. My dad had already written me off by the time I was 2, and really all I heard from him was how I wasn't able to do things good enough. Whether it was my grades or cleaning the bathroom, my chores, leaving the light on in the room when I walked out. Literally, this happened. My mom called me out to the living room. Hey, come watch this commercial because a friend of mine was in it. So I go out, okay, how long are commercials? Right? 30 seconds, maybe a minute, but that's like Super Bowl. This wasn't that. So I'm, 15, 30 seconds. I go out of my room to go watch this commercial so I can see a friend who's in a national commercial. This was, geez, back in the way early 80s. And I had just left my room. My dad comes walking out of his home office room, sees that my light is on, comes into the living room, doesn't ask, hey, what's going on? Just starts yelling at me for leaving my light on. That's the kind of stuff it was. And that happened frequently. That's just an example. But it was things like that where I'm like, could you just ask, you know, are you going back in your room? Did if you're going to be here for a while, can you go turn out the light? Can he be at least decent? No. It was just yelling at me again. Now, when it comes to my mom, this was a weird discovery in the course of these past 10 years. I couldn't put my finger on it because this trauma response typically happens when you don't have a safe person available, or uh, the severity happens when you don't have a safe person. But my mom was a safe person. I knew she loved me. But there was one factor that I truly believe fed into my trauma response, even about her, and that was her cancer. So when I was 5, I think it was, she had a mastectomy. She was very, very ill. She had cancer, breast cancer. I believe that breast cancer came to be because of my dad and that stress and his perfectionism, and she had to live with that. I can't guarantee that, of course. I have no hard evidence. But knowing what I know now and understanding how I grew up, it is very plausible that her cancer is a result, or at least the depth of it was a result of the stress that she lived because of my dad and his narcissistic being. And there's more to it. There's more to describe. I won't right now. The point is, I couldn't figure out how come my mom was not narcissistic at all. Anyone who knew my mom would say, "Are you crazy?" She was the most giving, loving, caring, genuine person. I mean, she was great. And you could tell that she loved you. And my brother, my sister, and I, we were definitely loved by my mom. So it's like, okay, so then how does that play into my absolute fawn response? But when I started thinking about it, it's like, when I was little, she was not available because she was trying to survive this cancer. And I do remember being told, don't bother your mom. Leave your mom alone. So as a small child, I don't understand what cancer is and what dying is and that sort of thing. I'm just told your mom can't help you. Your mom can't be your mom right now. But I needed my mom. And so I didn't understand, why can't I have my mom? And she was definitely the person I was attached to, especially being adopted. She was really my lifeline. And I can only remember growing up thinking, this is the only person on the planet who actually loves me. That's just how it was. 'Cause it certainly wasn't my dad. But even in school, I had some pretty severe situations where it was obvious that I was struggling, and people were very happy to mock me and to make my life miserable, to exploit and manipulate and take. So, having my mom being that one person that I could count on, but then understanding as I got older how sick she was, and she fought for a super long time. So, I have A, when I was really little, and she was very, very sick, having surgery and different treatments and things, and was not available to me. And then as I get a little older, she got into some better health, so we thought, but then it came back with a vengeance, this cancer. Now I am in a panic mode. I'll do anything to make my mom's life easier and happier. Just don't die. That's where this fawn response came in regard to my mom because of the cancer. It wasn't her personality. It was the cancer. Cancer is a freaking narcissist. It doesn't give a shit whether you want to die or not. It doesn't give a crap about who is reliant on you. It doesn't matter if you have children or pets or, a parrot that you have to will because they live so long. You have to will to someone, excuse me, if you pass away. Cancer doesn't care, nor does any other kind of disease. They don't care. They're flippin' narcissists, cancers, diseases. They just wreak their havoc And whatever's left in the wake is what's left in the wake, which is usually a tremendous amount of heartache and struggle. So it came to realization that I came to that realization that it was the cancer that was creating this fawn response in me, coupled with my dad and his behavior toward me. Then throw in situations at school where I was ostracized for a couple of years at school in the sixth and seventh grades, a miserable time of life to be shunned by everyone, including the teachers. I learned real fast that adults suck. And the only person that I could really trust was my mom. And again, that feeds into that trauma response. So you put all of those things together, and I became a very good fawn expert. You need something? What can I do? Um, how do I make this better? How do I keep everybody happy? How do I keep the peace? Because I can't stand all that stress. I have to have some kind of peace or feeling that I'm going to be okay and that I'm safe and accepted. That's what this whole thing is about, is the lack of those feelings of being safe and accepted. So I definitely developed a strong fawn trauma response, which then led me to different relationships, mostly the romantic kind. Definitely some friends in there too, what I would quote unquote friends, but for who to pair up with, boyfriends, and then of course my ex-husband. Lots and lots and lots of stuff there. And it took me until I was wanting to leave the planet before I made any changes. And that's really sad. So, my question is, if you're in this same kind of situation where doesn't matter how you got here, doesn't matter if it was your, um, if it was your parents, if it was a sibling, a teacher, or just society at large with the different rules and things you're supposed to know and behave a certain way. It's not necessarily all about altruism. Sometimes it's about just trying to control people. And that's what this leads into as well. So, yeah, I grew up with this pattern, which then compelled me to find people like my dad, because you get into this repeat thing where you have to, like, you don't even really have a choice, it seems, to find a good, wholesome, healthy person. Two reasons. One, if that person is actually healthy, even if you survive the first date, or maybe a few, eventually that person's going to figure out, this one's got too much baggage, too much whatever, and they're going to leave. They're going to probably let you down fairly nicely, but say, I need to move on. So there's that. But there's also the person in here looking at a healthy person and going, well, there's nothing for me to fix. They don't need me. I'm not useful here. I can't help with anything. And so, because of the lack of chaos, maybe things are really nice and great with that person. That might last a bit, but after a while, the fawn type will get bored and seek trauma, because that's what we know. That's what we grew up with as comfortable. We gotta have a little bit of stress, gotta have that cortisol hit, because by this time as an adult, we've lived on so much cortisol, literally, we are now addicted. That's what's happening physiologically, and it's crazy when you really stop and think about it. It makes sense. But it's like, before you really give it any kind of thought, you're just scrambling from one thing to another, looking for that cortisol hit, and you don't even know why. And it's all intertwined in this fawn trauma response, any trauma response, that is. The question again, though, is how long? How long are you going to put up with that? How much is enough? When is enough actually enough? I'm hoping that if you are dealing with some of these things yourself and you're going, hey, that sounds like me. Why do I end up with these people who end up being another asshole? Right? And how come I can't hang with someone who's actually nice? They're too nice. Uh, but I don't fit in. I don't feel like this is a good match because they're so nice. If you're in that situation, I really hope that you will take a moment to think about this stuff and check out my ebook because I delve in a little bit further. It is, oh, what is it called? From almost ending it all to becoming a fun hot bitch mom. How's that for a title? Because that's what happened. I was about ready to end it all, but then it all turned around, and now life is dramatically way better. So much different and so much better. It took a lot of struggle though, and it took a long time for me to figure out all of these things, which is why I've written this ebook so that I can give some shortcuts to the things that I learned along the way instead of it taking you 8 to 10 years to figure stuff out. And why not figure it out way shorter than that? I'm talking lots and lots of years shorter. That'd be nice, huh? To be able to just get into the life you actually want, what you really want in life, and create the peace and the acceptance, the safety that you're really looking for, that we're all looking for, and fulfilling your dreams even. Everyone has a dream that they have, something to fulfill, something to bring to everyone else. That's why we're here. It's part of why we're here, to share that. But if you're being stifled like I was, I couldn't share that, and it was literally driving me to my grave. And are you going to wait until then? It's hard to step out of our comfort zones. I know that. I was ready to step out of my comfort zone though into a hole in the ground. That's not a really great step to take. That's a long fall, a really long fall. So I'm hoping that if you're resonating with this at all, if anything at all that I've said has made sense to you and you're going, that you'll take a look at my ebook for sure, but also that you'll ask yourself some really important questions like, how long am I going to put up with this? Really? And I know it's hard. It's a tough question. And it's really tough to look at the circumstances you might be facing and feel like you have what it takes to walk away. And there might be some really hefty things involved. I walked away from my marriage. I have 2 kids, and I was ready to leave the planet thinking, well, they've got their dad. That was a huge mistake. Huge mistake in my thinking. But by this time I was so depressed. I just couldn't I didn't have it in me anymore. I really don't want you to get to that point. There's so much more that you could have in life and that you could be. What about that? What could you be? Who could you be if you didn't have all of that stress? If you didn't have someone over you being mean all the time or just nitpicky or giving you that vibe of you must do as I say or it's going to come back on you. And that's why I was such a good fawn. I went with whatever my ex wanted, whatever it was, and I stuffed it. I just stuffed it. And it took its hugest toll. That it was a huge toll. I really would like for you to be able to avoid that, or at least see where you are right now and be able to make some changes that can help you get out or at least be able to start standing up for yourself at minimum, because you're going to need that. Otherwise, before long, the only choices there are, really, the only options there are is that you're going to continue going down that road and end up like me, nearly ending it, or you just live a very regret filled and unfulfilling life because you're not being who you're supposed to be. Because that got smushed out of you starting when you were a kid. And then because of this response pattern, you just keep seeking that same kind of energy, that same kind of thing. How long are you going to wait? I really encourage you, please just take a look at the ebook from, what was it again? From nearly ending it all to fun hot bitch mom. And just start there. It's a good place to start. It's an easy read, and it might help shed more light and at least get you thinking, like, what how do I fit in this? Do you have the same kind of thing going on? Are you with people that you know deep down are treating you like shit? It happens a lot, and part of the reason it happens a lot is because we allow it, and that's part of the problem, which is exactly why I'm talking about this stuff now, so that we have some solutions to be able to stop bringing those kind of people into our lives. They're gonna continue to exist for sure. It's not like we're gonna change them. We're not. No one can change the narcissistic type, the takers, the manipulators, and exploiters. You cannot change them. They will refuse to change themselves. We can change because we aren't stuck in that delusion of grandeur. We know that we are weak in certain areas, or we just feel like we don't have what it takes. And actually, I shouldn't use the word weak because the fawn trauma response is not a weakness, it is a response. It is a pattern that was ingrained into the subconscious while you were still a young child. So it's not actually weakness. It's pretty darn strong. It's kept you going this whole time. But now that we know that as an adult, the fawn trauma response is 100% working against us, we can do something about it if we choose to. And because of this type of personality, we do want to change. We want to be better people. That's part of the fawn too. So funny, but it's a good part. And again, it's not like we're throwing out being nice and being good and being helpful and giving and all of that sort of thing. It's where is that coming from? What is the initiation of any given situation? Is it to actually be helpful because you want to give? Or is there some fear underlying that? Is it to make sure that you're staying safe and accepted? Is is it that kind of thing? Is it being brought about by a fear-based initiation? Or is it because, you're amongst fellow fawns that are safe, that there's a reciprocation and you know that, yeah, I can help this person 'cause and eventually they're gonna help me too. Not that that's why we help someone else, but it's knowing that we're not wasting our energy on someone who's never gonna give back and all they do is suck us dry. Those are not the right kind of people, and we don't want them in our lives. But how do you know how to handle them? How do you discern who they are? Those are some of the things I go over in my ebook and more. So, again, how long is it going to take? I went way, way extreme with my fawn response pattern and letting it run roughshod over my life. And that's when I rebelled against. I just said, I can't do this anymore. Can't do it. So thankfully, I didn't actually go through with what I thought I was going to need to do because I didn't see any other option. But very thankfully, over the course of the last 10 years, I have found way better options, way better. And that's what I'm sharing with you. Take a look at that ebook and tomorrow come back so that we can continue on. There's this fascinating thing I'm going to talk about tomorrow or the next episode, which is what happens, how this becomes ingrained in us subconsciously, and how we develop what I call the KLIE, KLIE playlist in the back of our mind. All kinds of negative talk. And it started out as negative talk to us by these authoritative people, whoever it was, or even neighbors and people who have some kind of motivation to try to control us or hurt us. And it starts this whole playlist. It's like constantly streaming in the back of your mind. Sometimes the volume gets turned up. And by adulthood, it's no longer their voice, but it's our own voice spouting out these horrible things. And we become our own worst enemy. Then on the other side of that is the K hot playlist, KHOT. And that is filled with the right kinds of things that you should be thinking of. I had to make that transition. I had to figure out how to turn down and actually take uh, not songs, but phrases off of that streaming platform going on in my mind and developing a much better playlist. Like I'm constantly adding fun new songs onto my convertible dance party playlist that I love to listen to, especially with the top down on the car. So much fun. And it is fun. So it's a matter of being able to add good things on that K hot playlist that's going in your mind and diminishing the KLIE playlist that's been there for however long, whatever your lifespan is at this point, because it started when you were a very, very young child and probably didn't know that that's playing, but you recognize how you talk to yourself and how you call yourself names, or you're so disappointed in yourself when you make a mistake or something and you don't let yourself off the hook. That's not that's not how you came here. That was implanted. So there's a lot of things to discover, and we'll be talking more about that tomorrow. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time on the Rebel Ballerina Show.